Welcome, Kevin, to Conversations with the Innovation Heroes of Mach49. So let me actually sort of begin with West Point. I mean, here you are, you're a West Point guy. You know, when I sort of see the arc from West Point to, you're the head of innovation at Stanley, you have built businesses. So when you look at this arc, was this something you had planned to do all along, or was there chance and accident in your journey? How would you describe that, Kevin?
It has been quite a journey from those days. I don't know if I've made complete sense of that arc today, but reflecting and looking back, and actually I was down in Carmel this past weekend, and that's where I started my Army career, was down at Fort Ord, 30 some odd years ago. So I have had some time to process this a little bit. But I don't know, I think the one common theme is kind of the road less traveled, maybe. I've always been kind of curious and looking for new adventures. West Point was that, the Army was that, and kind of each step in the career has delivered on new adventures. So no, I can't say look back to West Point or the Army and say, gosh, I knew I'd be launching new businesses for a large Fortune 500 30 years down the road, but thrilled to be here.
That's wonderful. But both were wonderfully established organizations, and I would assume you were an innovator in both. Is that a reasonable thing to say, Kevin?
I think that's fair to say. Every organization needs their disruptors, or the folks that are thinking a little differently. Early on in your military career, there's probably a little less tolerance for that. It's kind of structured. West Point certainly was that, but I think it's fair to say that I like to try to find the boundaries and see where it makes sense to push beyond those boundaries.
Fabulous. So let's actually get to Stanley. So I want to take you back to the day when your CEO called you and said, Kevin, we need to incubate, we need to become innovators, and I want you to actually spearhead the process. What was your first reaction, Kevin?
Well, it didn't quite happen that way. Much like other steps along the way in the career, it kind of flowed from the last thing I was working on and finding those areas of opportunity or those problems that needed to be solved. So I started my career at Stanley Black & Decker leading up pricing for the organization. So you don't, normally equate or put pricing and innovation in the same
I was thinking,
bucket. And, that is one of those things, as I look back, it actually is a lot more natural than it sounds on paper. In the pricing game, it's, there's two major flavors to it. There's one that's very process driven, very, let's make sure we stop the bleeding, reduce the discounting, very necessary for large organizations to get a handle on the processes. And then the other side of the coin is really what we call value pricing, or understanding at a very deep level kind of the pains, the needs, what customers are willing to pay for. And that's where I kind of gravitated to midway through my pricing journey. And that's when I joined Stanley Black & Decker, was focused very much on this value pricing piece. So there was a bit of a journey over the first kind of 7+ years at Stanley Black & Decker, getting those capabilities built up, but it also, through the work in working with our product teams, our sales teams, it helped highlight this challenge where a large organization like ours finds it difficult to innovate, to come up with new solutions to new problems outside of the core categories we're currently competing in. And what our CEO did say was, he was frustrated with how rapidly we were commercializing as a company. Within our core categories, fantastic. We're really paying the bills and innovating there. But if we want to try something different, it was challenging. So that was really the rallying cry that our team took up and said, we can really help here. We can take a lot of our past learnings, experiences, and relationships with folks in the businesses. So it was with that kind of mandate and umbrella when we set out as a team to try to understand at a deeper level what it does take to innovate outside of the core. That's when we started, doing a lot of research, reaching out to thought leaders like your organization, and kind of teeing up some of those first opportunities that we wanted to experiment with and begin building capabilities around.
So how would you characterize innovating in a large company, Kevin? Is this, when some people think of innovation, they think, well, there's only one front in this war, and that's the marketplace. But sometimes in a large organization, people think there are two fronts. The mothership front, where you have to cope with friendly fire, if you will, and at the same time, cope with competitors. Was this an issue for you, or was it not?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. And I think that was one of the things that, we understood early going into this, that was going to be a challenge for our efforts. I mean, just the fact that we were having a tough time, no lack of desire to innovate outside of our core categories, just struggling to kind of make it happen. So, we were aware of a lot of these problems. And then when we began, speaking with Mach49 and other organizations, it was crystal clear that this was going to be a challenge that we had to get ahead of. So we did take it head on. And
so, sometimes when I sort of think of innovation and people such as yourself incubating in a large company, where, as you rightly point out, innovating outside of the core business, that DNA is hard to have. So as you think of that, or at least as I think of that, I think of potential innovators in a large company being in a room called doubt. Because things haven't worked in the past. There's skepticism. Hey, we tried it, it didn't work. And then you got to get to a room called hope. So was that your journey moving from, or rather a room called confidence? So was that your journey, innovation journey, moving from a room called doubt to a room called confidence?
Yeah. And, there's layers to that. If you set the right environment up from the top, and you're willing to accept risk, and you're willing to live in this world of doubt and ambiguity, you can get a lot more done. Now you're trying to recruit people to your effort, innovators that you might want to come and be a part of this project. Sure. They've been a part of a large organization that has operated in a certain way, and may have been making decisions that weren't, entirely friendly to this risk taking.
Yeah.
Yes, we can say it's great for risk taking, but if we take a risk and there's a stumble, and then there are repercussions, that does have an impact. And so it was important for us to communicate this desire and this willingness to take risks, and to demonstrate it the first time we had to turn off an initiative because we weren't seeing the promise of it. So we had to deliver on that promise of taking care of the people that were a part of it.
Right. I'll come to both of those in just a little while, Kevin. But what I would very much appreciate is if you can share with the listeners, how was the Mach49 process, the passageway between both these rooms, the room called doubt to a room called confidence?
Well, I mean, Mach49 works with large organizations that this is, you know, this is the way things are. They've been there, they've seen the patterns, and it can help us be proactive. So it was critical for us to, you know, show that we're working with a group of folks that have been there, that have dealt with these challenges, can help us think about how to communicate. What are the strategies working with the different levels in the organization? So, you know, I mean, it's just critical. It's critical that we had a team that understood that could, you know, help us understand what was coming and be prepared for it.
Right. So is it fair to say, Kevin, that in your due diligence at Mach49, you specifically looked as to how battle scarred they were, or how many bruises David had, or?
I don't know. I thought everything I heard is everything worked perfectly. So no, it was, yeah. I mean, they were genuine. I mean, you could tell from the beginning that, you know, David, Sharpie, you know, all of the other folks on the team had just vast amounts of experience. And, you know, especially in the last incubation we did, when I was much closer to it, actually, I could see how that experience helps, you know, not only at the top levels, the executive level, but in the trenches, to keep these teams moving.
Yeah.
So yeah, I kind of breezed right through those, but you know, the three phases, the pains, the solutions, and the business viability make a ton of sense for us.
Were there any surprises for you in these three phases?
Well, I mean, every day, you know, what you've got is a group of folks coming together who haven't met each other, in a lot of cases haven't met each other, working in a very intense environment over a relatively short amount of time to gather information, extract insights, make decisions. You know, I guess surprised that you know, we can get a high functioning team to come through and deliver through that. Of course, there's, you know, there's every different flavor. We had our own surprises on the other side as well, where things didn't necessarily work out. That took a lot more energy to kind of correct.
Yeah, let me sort of bring you in, David, here, David Charpie. So what was the process, the journey for you like, as you worked with Kevin and his team members?
The process for us was really, you know, to understand what Kevin and what Stanley Black & Decker were really trying to achieve. You know, because even though the methodology or process we may follow to bring a team through it is reasonably similar, the output of that and how it gets accepted within the mothership of the organization is never the same, because they're all in different places, have different beliefs, have different support structures, etc. So a critical part of the success of anything we had to do with the Stanley Black & Decker folks was really understanding that, trying to get ourselves around and get our heads around what Kevin was dealing with on his second front of the war, and how we could support that or give him information to do that. So I think that was, you know, for me, that was a first part of it. And the second one was just getting to know Kevin and that Black & Decker team. You know, I've count myself lucky that, you know, I've had the chance now to work with Kevin on 4 different incubations. So I had a fairly long-standing relationship, and, you know, in a lot of ways, very much a friend of mine now. It's like we can, you know, because we've probably had more dinners at Linda's house than we might remember, but it's been great. So
that's lovely. So Kevin, back to you. You know, moments ago, David alluded to 4 incubations. You know, sometimes when people think of innovation, they think of innovation as gathering ideas. Another view of innovation is actually really effective innovation consists of killing good ideas too. So can you share with us the balance? You know, did you have to kill ideas? If so, when?
Well, yeah, absolutely. For this to be, for this process to have integrity and for it to be viable, yes. Not every idea is worthy of moving forward. Not every developed concept that even gets all the way close to the end is worthy of continuing to go on. So if we understand that, then you can have a lot more discipline around the process. And that's what's critical is having kind of intellectual honesty and discipline going through this. So yeah, we killed many early on, even before they got to the point of us having to make a decision on whether we wanted to fund it. And those are relatively easy to kill. Once you funded them, the initial money to take it into an incubation, once it's gotten a lot more visibility in the organization, the reality is that becomes a little trickier. Most Fortune 500 companies and most companies are all about get it done. Let's do it. We started this. Let's keep going. Innovation is a little different. We want to keep going till we've gathered the information that says go further or don't do this anymore. And we got to that point in one of our first 3 incubations, and it was a great learning experience for the entire organization, because we had to bring it back to the organization and say, look, we've already started this. We're halfway through this incubation. We spent this amount of money. We don't see it as a true exponential opportunity, and we're gonna kill this. Ultimately, it wasn't a hard fought battle. It made sense, but it was a discussion. It certainly was a discussion at a very high level in the company.
Was it also a cultural milestone at Stanley?
I would say so. Absolutely. Yeah. It was definitely a learning moment for us.
Something that had been done after a long time?
Well, and again, this flavor of innovation that we were doing was a little different. So it was one of the first opportunities we had to make this tough decision.
So, David mentioned that, curious, as you look back, was there a difference between the first incubation and, let's say, the 3rd or 4th incubation? And if so, what were the differences, if at all?
Well, and David knows this more than anybody, the process is relatively the same. The dynamics have to do with the people, the nature of the opportunity. So in some respects, they're completely different. Each one has its own characteristics. So, from a process perspective, I don't think I see a big difference. And to be fair, I didn't live the day-to-day on those. But the things that were different were, how quickly you get to an understanding of where the opportunity is, or how hard fought it was to wrestle this thing to, the right viable opportunity. All of those just it looks really different each time.
David, what's your perspective on this? The first incubation and the 3rd or 4th incubation, did you discern differences?
I think Kevin, I agree mostly with Kevin, right? Which is the basic underlying principles of the process were reasonably the same. There were some differences, like there was one in construction versus others where we had to do things in person versus on phones and do more physical as opposed to less physical and digital environments. But largely the same kind of results were coming out. But it's always the team, right? The teams are different and the goals are different, as Kevin said, and that drives differences. Now, I would also argue, though, that I think there were differences on the Stanley Black & Decker side in terms of their maturity in dealing with the process. As is always the case, the first time there's a lot of questions about, so why are we doing it this way, and why don't we size the market so we have some idea what the heck is happening here before we go jumping into it. All sorts of things that are normal and natural as you go through the first time in this. And as we get a chance with someone like Stanley to get to the 3rd and the 4th one, especially with the same team, in this case, Kevin in particular coming back, the conversations and the communication becomes so much simpler.
Yeah.
There is a
right.
Yeah, there's a repeatability. So when I reference, oh, we're going to do this next, Kevin's like, oh yeah, I know exactly where you're going, right? And can contribute to that conversation extremely well, as opposed to the first time I've had said that, he's going, well, what's that? And what are you trying to do?
Right.
So
That's what I was kind of
think there's a
getting
lot
at.
of value.
Yeah, that's very helpful. Thank you both. Because what I was trying to underscore was that coordination improved because there was so much common knowledge. Everybody knew what was happening. Predictability improved. So both Kevin and David, when I sort of think of an innovation team, and Kevin was sort of alluding to it, hey, you need to kind of get people who are willing to break the mold a little bit. People are going to question and challenge and all that. But once you get funding and as you're scaling the venture and trying to get into the market, one probably needs business builders or founders, loosely put. How do you find them in a large organization? And how does the Mach49 process help, if at all, in discovering who the founders are?
Yeah. So the Mach49 team, number one, has a vast network, has worked with founders, hundreds of times. So having that context and help us understand what are the right characteristics we should be looking for was critical. But that is the challenge. I will say that's where a lot of the stress came in, because you're trying to get support to go do something, do an incubation. The incubation is the thing that defines what the opportunity is. So at what point is the right time to bring on that founder type person or that CEO to get agreement from the organization to go do this incubation could take 6 months. I can't hire that person 6 months earlier at the beginning of this to help sell this to the organization. I've got to get this framed up and then bring that person in. And oh, by the way, I've already signed up to go. So now I've already got a start date. So I've got this, it's a long way of saying I've got this compressed window to find the perfect person to be a part of this. Now, fortunately, the process accommodates it to a nice extent with the Blitz, where we get a chance to bring a lot of different people in to participate in this 2-week or 2-day workshop. And you get to see some people in action. And then, from there you can decide to bring them on for an incubation, which is a 12-week process. And, we were fortunate to be able to find people who are of high caliber, were available to participate in a 3-month process. And then through that process, you determine whether you got the right team in place or form up that right team that's going to be the long-term startup founding team. So that upfront part is really hard. We've got to exercise our entire network to try to find those people. And again, Mach49's network has just been, invaluable in that regard.
David, what's your take on this?
Yeah, I agree with Kevin. I think actually the folks in Stanley Black & Decker have done as good or better a job than almost anyone I've seen in actually managing this part of the process. It is really challenging to make the difficult calls of hiring someone early enough to be able to hear the customer, get the empathy, understand the trajectory of the business, what the idea is trying to do, so that they can actually run it successfully when you start to launch. And at the same time, get yourself in a place where you've got buy-in from the mothership and the rest of the corporation to do it. And I think, the thing that has allowed Stanley to do this so well has been Kevin's willingness to combine folks from his internal organization with folks outside, right? To look at who inside Black & Decker can add value, understands this space, can do some of the activities, and yet where are the gaps where we need to be filling stuff and bringing new talent to bear? And as Kevin said, leveraging the network, whether it's ours or his, to try to do that. And Kevin and I spend many a day on an interview with candidates to try to get those teams together. And I think that's really worked well. We can argue that there has been every combination where Kevin has had people that have not worked out by the time they were done from the outside, have not worked out from the inside, have worked out from the inside, not from the outside, and everything you can imagine. And so we've learned more, and he's learned more about what it is that has to be done for the right profile, not just the right skill set, but the right profile to work within the Black & Decker innovation space. And so I think he's done a great job of it. And I think, Mach49 has been helpful in terms of leveraging our network for him and running blitzes as a way to help learn. But, at the end of the day, it's your skill in understanding those profiles that makes you successful. And they are different by company.
So that's wonderful. Kevin, one of the things I discovered when I looked at some of your earlier conversations with Jason was that you guys also had early on, before you, involved Mach49, my understanding was that you had a digital accelerator in Atlanta. Is that understanding valid?
That's correct. Yep. We do have a digital accelerator there today.
Now, I understand you're also building something new for Stanley in the Bay Area, in Silicon Valley.
So we have our organization, Stanley X, is here out in Sunnyvale.
Right. So how is Stanley X different than the digital accelerator in Atlanta?
Today, the digital accelerator is part of Stanley X. I think as part of this innovation journey for the company as a whole, we're continuing to learn and refine. The digital accelerator was originally stood up as a bit of a center of competency around technologies. And, when we began that 4 some odd years ago, we were in need of really bringing in, basic digital capabilities to the company. So the digital accelerator has supported the company in kind of waves of, technological transformation, from kind of the basics to the next level of technology that, are capabilities that don't exist in the core of the business that we need smart folks to develop and then push into the business. And so that was really the mode of digital accelerator, was technical competency. So robotics, AI, from the beginning, digital marketing, things like that. And once we've got the capabilities built and we've got the engagement with the business, that gets pushed into the business and we move on to that next level, whether that's, quantum computing or whatever comes next. So that was really the vision for the digital accelerator, not so much a commercialization mandate. Very different from Stanley X, which is new sources of growth for our company. So we'll work with the digital accelerator, we'll work with our Stanley Ventures team, but we're building businesses here.
Lovely. So one other sort of question as a follow-up. When companies come to the Bay Area and Silicon Valley and they establish innovation centers, one of the challenges they face is they come in, they establish physical presence because they're so impressed with their early experience of being networked in the Valley. But once you come in at scale and you have a building, walls quickly kind of develop and you become another silo of sorts. Was that an issue for you guys? And if so, how did you manage to sidestep it?
So that's a great question. And when you say another silo within the corporation?
Within the corporation and also siloed in the Valley as well.
Yeah. Well, I think, number one, I think it's really important, and it has been super important for us to be here, to have this physical presence. Now, I mean, we're all working remotely, so, you could kind of argue that, but still this physical presence in this time zone as a part of this ecosystem, getting to know folks over at Stanford, et cetera, I think is critical. It demonstrates your commitment to this journey. I think some of the fault modes have been, people have, past companies have come in and spent a few years and a lot of money and maybe not progressed as much as they'd wanted to, and then left, and maybe left some bruised relationships. I think it's important to come in and have that long-term commitment with the venture community, the startup community, the other strategics in the area. So I think that's been a huge win for us on building out that ecosystem. From the other side, creating another silo relative to the rest of our core business, I think it's been a bit of a challenge. I think I mentioned our key mission for Stanley X is new sources of growth. The other mission is inject innovation back into the business. So, when we started this and we wanted to build out this capability, it was important that we completely separated from the rest of Stanley Black & Decker, kind of extract ourselves from the mothership a bit. Well, now that we're up and running and we have some, this capability built, it is incumbent upon us to rebuild or reconnect with the rest of the organization so that they get the benefit of all of our learnings. I think having this organization set up here was necessary to get that up and running, and now gives us more of that ability to connect back into the business.
Right.
I think it's breaking down walls.
Breaking down, wonderful. So I'd love to ask both of you this question. I'd like to begin with you, Kevin. Given your involvement in the innovation journey with Mach49 and now with Stanley X, how have you changed as a leader and as a person? And here, if I can be mischievous for a moment, what does your wiser half say about your change and growth as a leader?
Wow. Okay. This has been quite a growth opportunity, I would say. Getting to exercise both sides of the brain. I mean, we're trying to build process and capability while enabling teams to go do very breakthrough type of things. So I gotta think it's added to hopefully my agility here. You referenced my military background. I don't think I've been saddled with this over fixation on process, but here you've got to push the boundaries on the other side. So dealing with ambiguity, really relying on teams to get things done in the face of a lot of uncertainty and ambiguity, and trust. Trust in your teammates, trust in executive leadership, that they're going to continue to support this. But the wiser side, gosh, I don't know. This has been a heck of a lot of fun. This is the kind of learning and growing that I just love to do.
That's lovely. What about your children? You spoke about managing ambiguity and, all of this. Has this changed the way you act as a parent, for example? In other words, I'm interested in how do you take your Mach49 learnings and apply it in your life?
Yeah, no, I hope so. I certainly hope I'm having an influence. I do think, innovation is all about solving problems. That's what it comes down to. We all face those every day in our lives, and it's how you face those and how you look for the solutions. So yeah, I think that's probably been a continued area of growth for me, and hopefully that's rubbed off on the family.
That's lovely. David, what about you? How has this changed you? 4 incubations with Stanley Black & Decker.
At the end of the day, Huggy, it's changed in terms of the relationships I've been able to build and the impacts of those relationships with every one of those teams that Kevin's put together. I had the luxury of meeting every one of them the first day they came in and starting to work with them. And the fun part was I said the same thing to all 4 teams, which was I said, I don't know how and I don't know when, but I know one thing. When you go through this process, it's going to fundamentally change you and you're going to learn something about yourself you never knew. And because of that, you're going to go back and do your work or work with your family in a different way than you ever have as well. And I got a lot of dubious looks, but every single one of those people, and I don't know the exact count, Kevin, it's probably like 25, 26 people or whatever else we went through here, came back to me at the end of this and said, you were right. I did. I learned something about myself I never knew. And I have to change what I do at work and how I work. And so, to have that kind of an impact to make people's lives change that way and change them is a very rare opportunity in life. And so it's a great value to me. It's a great value, hopefully back to Stanley Black & Decker and thing that I've enjoyed. And then back to my better half is really ecstatic about it because I've never had a job I've loved more because of it. And so she's happy because I'm happy and I'm not complaining. So it works out for both of us.
That's wonderful. Now we're coming to the close of our conversation, but before we close, Kevin and David, are there questions I should have asked you, but I did not?
One of the areas, and you sort of asked it, but I don't think I answered it completely before, but in terms of getting support for folks to actually participate in these efforts from the rest of the company, how do you do that? How do you get people past that doubt and encourage them to come in, be a part of this? And I would say that's something that we're continuing to work on. I think we've had a nice mix, as David said, of folks from the outside and the inside. We're probably leaning a little bit more. We've leaned a little bit more towards folks from the outside, but we want to, make this a place now for folks to come in and be a part of this process and go back into the business if that's what they'd like. But I would say that's still a challenge and a work in progress.
Yeah, mobilizing people certainly is, as you pointed out, a challenge. David, do you have any questions? John, you've been listening in as well. AJ?
Yeah, no, I think 2 things crossed my mind, I guess, Huggy. I mean, one of them is some things that Kevin referenced, which would be, I think, an interesting question in terms of from these 4 incubations, what has gone back and still survives within your organization in terms of tools, processes, efforts, as opposed to what have you chosen to change and learned from that? That'd be one question. The second question would be related to what you just said, I guess, is really, as we always talk about this, and we've had this conversation, you're in the objective of building a portfolio. You want to have a portfolio of these things happening. How do you think about creating a portfolio inside of a place like Stanley Black & Decker, where obviously each one of these is a major event in and of itself, and yet I need many of them to have a portfolio. So how do we approach that problem in a constructive way? I guess those would be my 2 questions.
Very thoughtful questions.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Kevin.
Can I take a crack at them?
Please.
Let me start with the second one, and then you can actually remind me of the first one. But the second one, you're right. It takes a ton of energy to go and do any one particular incubation. It's a fantastic process. It's important. It's at this point now. It's one of several aspects of innovation. In building out a portfolio. So we will do incubations. We will also invest in other startups. We may just have commercial agreements with other folks, and we may acquire. So we got the full build, buy, partner. So that's kind of how we're thinking about it. This is kind of the anchor piece, because around this we built our process. We are internalizing a lot of these practices, and I guess this gets to the first question that you teed up, David. We've learned a ton. Those phases of the incubation, they resonate, they make a lot of sense, and we built process around it to essentially now do these ourselves. And so we're hiring folks, we're investing in people and process so that this is an engine of growth for us.
That's lovely.
And it'll support the whole build by partner approach.
Very well, very well stated and very well articulated, Kevin. Great fun, John and AJ and David and Kevin, particularly Kevin. Very much appreciate your time.
Thanks,
very
Huggy.
much appreciate your candor.